My name is Shehzeen Ahmed, Director of Account Management here at Open Influence, and I'm joined by Sei Cho today, Director of Digital Experiences at Horizon Media.
Hello, everybody. Clearly, I have a fan group up here in the front.
Sei, do you want to give us a little bit of an intro on what you do at Horizon?
Absolutely, because what the heck is digital experiences? I thought this was influencer marketing. I work at Horizon Media. It's the largest independent media agency. We take a very unique approach to things, and digital experiences is our end-to-end solution for creating digital content really made for the medium. So we do a lot of different things, but my specific role at Horizon is overseeing content strategy, community management, and influencer marketing.
Awesome. That's great. That's a lot.
It is a lot, but I have an awesome team that really does all the work.
Yeah, and so what we're here to talk about a little bit today is, social media is in pretty much every community in the world, and they have different communities online everywhere. And where you have those communities, you have key opinion leaders, you have these influencers who are helping to shape those opinions. And it's in some instances, it's really easy to find the people who are really going to match with your brand and your audience. And in others, it's a little bit more challenging, and you have unique types of brands and products that you're trying to promote, and it's not as simple and straightforward in finding those people who are going to be the right influencers. So that being said, say when you think about who are the most prototypical influencers or categories, what really comes to mind for you?
That's easy. So typical beauty, fashion, travel, parents, moms get their whole own category. We see this a lot now, kind of that ubiquitous lifestyle influencer, which I still am trying to figure out, but I think it just means you're open to all sponsorships.
Pretty much, yeah, exactly. And so you have those different types of influencers that really come to mind, and it's really easy to say, okay, great, we're going to work with moms on this. It's, a diaper brand, right? But then you have other opportunities where it's not always just as straightforward, right? So when you're in situations like that, when you have a brand that is not always that easy and that simple to really think, okay, this is a straightforward shot, what types of approaches can brands and agencies take in those situations?
I wish we got more simple asks that were, find us a beauty influencer. No, a lot of times the asks are really nuanced, and you'd be surprised once you apply all of the filters that it requires to find the right match. Is their audience right? Is their engagement right? Is the reach going to be right? Does the sponsored content really fit into their feed? It can whittle down a pool very, very quickly. And we are working with limited inventory. We are working with specific talent pools. So certainly one approach that we've really taken is to really look at influencers as people. I know that sounds really basic, but they're not publishers, they're not singular categories. An automotive influencer doesn't just speak to automotive. They have families, they have lives, they have troubles, they have financial woes. So it does take some time, but I think really getting to know your influencer, having those conversations with them where you can kind of find those common grounds or universal themes is one really creative approach that's unlocked kind of solutions for services or things that are less tangible that you can just put in an Instagram post.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree with you on that. I think that, being able to think about the audience first and who the influencer is speaking to rather than just the influencer themselves is really what's key. It reminds me of a campaign that we worked on here at Open Influence with an entertainment brand. It was a TV network, and they had a show coming out about real estate. So there were a bunch of famous real estate agents who were looking to help other people flip properties. And of course, the client's first ask was, hey, can you go find us a bunch of real estate influencers? And we're like, oh, okay. So, not so simple, not an unlimited pool like you said. And so when you really start to think about these very niche type of categories and those areas where you don't have a ton of influencers and options, you start to have to wonder, okay, how many of these boxes can we check? If you want them to be a real estate influencer, do we also need to make sure that they're in certain regions? Are we also looking at the ages of their audience? Are we really focusing on the right things? Or are we really just saying, okay, it's a real estate TV show, we need real estate influencers?
It's funny, we work on a lot of entertainment brands, and you'd think that's pretty straight and narrow. if it's a Marvel, movie, it's pretty easy. But depending on the theme or the topic of the show, it can get, pretty challenging. One example I can definitely think of is we recently worked on an entertainment campaign for a brand that was putting together a docuseries that was touching on some really serious but important topics. Stand your ground, cash bail, voter suppression. And, looking through that brief in that RFP, we were like, oh my gosh, how do we get influencers to talk about this in a way that is authentic but carries the serious tone and manner, but also is going to be appropriate in feed? And it was a magical unicorn of a campaign in which we had a pretty good lead time. Brands
that
looking
never
at
happens,
you.
right?
Yeah. So we had the opportunity to first identify influencers based on their audiences and making sure that was a match for who we felt was going to be the target demographic for the show. And then from there, we had a lot of individual conversations with those influencers. And we actually let them lead the creative. So we explained what the show was about, and we asked them, how would you guys like to approach this? And it was kind of a reverse model. A lot of times there's a very clear brief. We want you to hold it in this way and do this and say these 5 talking points and then throw a hashtag ad on it. And it takes a little bit more time. But what we got out of it was some influencers were sharing stories of social injustices that they've faced, that are their own personal stories and actually didn't connect to one of the pre-described themes of the show. But they sat down, direct to camera. This is one of those situations in which a cell phone is actually very powerful in making it raw, not curated, and there was no fluff to it. It was just straight to camera talking, and it was actually very intimate in kind of the output and the effect. We also had influencers who took a different approach, and they saw the themes of the show, and they could actually identify where they were, what they were feeling, what they were doing when some of the major moments in time that the show covers, and they were able to kind of retell that story. So it created a nice variety of content that you don't typically get when you have a really pre-described creative brief.
Absolutely, and I know that we worked with you on this campaign, and what really made it successful is that we allowed those influencers to create that story rather than finding an influencer and saying, okay, here are 5 talking points, please make sure you hit them all. We asked them, how do these topics matter to you? How do they really affect you? And by letting them craft that story, letting them say what's really meaningful and relevant to them, we were able to have a really successful campaign. I remember one of the influencers on this campaign was actually a musician, and it was an interesting find because, we weren't really looking for musicians. We were looking for people who had been affected by these topics, and so if you were looking for this influencer and you were just scrolling through your feed, you would think, okay, this is a lifestyle, as you said, or musician influencer, and you wouldn't really stop to think about what they've experienced. And so she had actually written and produced a song about one of the topics that was on this show, about one of the social injustices. I think it was called Stand Your Ground, was one of the episodes, which was about gun control. And she had written a song about it even before this campaign. So, by finding her and allowing her to really tell that story, it resonated with her audience so well because they had already seen her talk about this topic, even though on her day-to-day feed, it was music and it was her lifestyle content, but it really felt more impactful for them to feel it that way. Yeah, and then, that being said, there are a lot of different examples and ways that we can make this type of content work. And working with the influencers and allowing them to really create what's important to them is what'll help us to be successful. And I know you guys have experienced this with some other campaigns, maybe in the automotive sector and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great example. We do a lot of work for SoCal Honda Dealership Association. Has anyone heard the Helpful Honda ads?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Wow, some newbies in here. It's their message of Helpful Honda has been in market for over a decade, and trying to find creative angles on that can be challenging. What we did is, especially with SoCal Honda and a brand like that, one of the biggest things we hear from influencer marketing isn't right for me is because they might have a very regional brand. SoCal Honda's focused on the LA and Orange County DMA only. So again, very limited talent pool. And And the approach we took here was actually, it's the campaign itself. Anybody can submit a helpful request online at helpmehonda.com, and we actually had influencers go through the Help Me Honda requests and actually find and identify requests that matched well with their own causes and passions, and hand select that. And what we actually found through that process is, so we ended up engaging Matt Stefanina, Todrick Hall, dancers, Catherine Schwarzenegger, a pet activist. So again, not typical, your automotive, that's where I'm going to straight go in terms of the category. But we got great rates. We got so much excitement, added value, because the influencers were just excited to be a part of, giving back to their community. And it was a campaign that they genuinely wanted to participate in. But that was those extra steps to kind of create that connection and find a common ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, when you are able to do that and they can pick what they're talking about, it feels more authentic, not just to their audience, but to them. You mentioned great rates. A lot of times when they feel like they're having an impact on the world and they feel really good about the content that they're creating and that it's doing something good for the community, the rate is not the driving factor in building that content and posting it. It's really, they feel like they're having a change and that what they do matters. And I think that that's really a big part of when we have these different types of industries and different types of verticals that we're working with, is what really drives them to feel passionate about what they're creating, versus just, like I said, here's some talking points, please make sure you hit 4 out of 5, So that's what's really, I think, impactful for them, to be able to say, what I did today helps somebody else as well.
And shameless plug, it's up for a 2019 Shorty Award, so go vote for it online.
Congratulations. Yes, we will. And so, like you said, it definitely takes a little bit more time. There are more steps, and it's not as simple to identify people from a list, not knowing what their personal stories are and not knowing what they've been through in their life. And at Open Influence, we have a really large account management team that is working with hundreds of influencers every single day. And we have some knowledge sharing where we say, hey, this influencer is about to get married, or this influencer just experienced this in their life. And so we kind of have that bandwidth to be able to share that information with each other. But for some clients and brands and agencies, they may not necessarily have the time to know every single influencer's bio and backstory and most recent life events. For brands like that, what would you recommend?
Coming from the agency perspective, the one thing is that agencies, brands will always know their consumer and their target better than anybody. So, my recommendation for if you don't have the bandwidth or can't partner with somebody to help with that, kind of focus it there. Start with who you're trying to reach, and then kind of crafting a content strategy around that approach. I think, the way we've structured our team as part of digital experiences, working side by side with community, with social listening, with social strategy, with content, allows us to kind of use that approach. So, for example, we were recently working on a finance campaign, and the finance company was releasing a new credit card that had a lot of benefits and rewards. And so we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we talk about this in a way that isn't gonna be a total snore, and that we get our message across. And so what we did there is we first identified who the target consumer was, really looking at, males, females over the age of 50. First, we identified what platforms they're on, what content they look at, whether that's online, offline. We figured out they were spending a lot of time on Facebook. And then from there, we kind of did a deep dive into the social listening to see what content was popping and engaging on Facebook among this group. And weirdly enough, we started to see a lot of videos of kids saying funny things. Does anybody watch Charlene's World on Facebook Watch?
Oh, you guys have to start.
It's amazing. Okay, look up Charlene's World on Facebook or Katie Ryan on Instagram. It's this girl, she's probably about 7, 8, and she does this alter ego named Charlene and says these like sassy, funny things that everyone's thinking. But kind of think Ellen DeGeneres, the kids that are on, that she features from YouTube, et cetera, and we kind of thought there was a nugget there. So we took the approach of actually having kids share and simplify the concepts of a credit card. And like kids just say the funniest things. Just the way they look at the world and the way they put things is universal and funny. And so we actually took that angle. And you know, kids for finance isn't a natural alignment when you might be thinking of these as categories, but it really worked in terms of who we were trying to reach, where we were talking to them. And I think everybody, you know, regardless of having relationships with influencers, can find those insights by spending time on social communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you said, when you think of finance, you don't think, oh, great, let's go talk to kids, right? And so doing some of that research and understanding, again, who the audience is, not who the influencer is every single time, is really what helps to drive that engagement and have people feel like it's very authentic for them. It brings to mind a campaign that we did here at Open Influence with a insurance brand, and they wanted to focus on retirement. So they have retirement services. It's not what you expect to see when you're scrolling your Instagram feed to somebody telling you to save money for retirement. And so, you know, we had to get a little bit creative in how we approach this kind of non-traditional aspect. And so a lot of times, you know, you think, okay, finance, it's insurance, it's retirement. Let's get some people who are really interested in, and their audiences will be thinking about finance. Let's get a business guy on here. But really, you know, that's a little bit too straightforward, and you're not going to be able to really tell a story there. And so what we did is, the same way that you took kids and you had them talk about finance, we took puppies and we had them talk about insurance and retirement. So, you know, this campaign was during the fall. It was during baseball playoff season. And so it was really relevant to have, during that time period, to have, you know, we had dogs and puppies playing fetch with baseballs. We had them on baseball fields, and their content was relevant. People were looking at it because that was happening in the everyday world. When they put their phone down, they were watching baseball. And so what we did is these puppies, their captions would be along the lines of, you know, when my parents, or as they call them, their parents, retire, I want to be able to play baseball with them, and I want to be able to spend time outdoors and do this. And, you know, what are you doing to think of your retirement? What are you doing to save up for retirement? So again, a little bit of a non-traditional approach, but it turned out to work very well for us because it got people to engage with the content. Everybody stops to look at the puppy pictures, right? So, you know, it really helped to raise that awareness and got people thinking about it, and got the conversation started, really. So that was kind of, you know, one way that we were able to approach the topic of retirement when it comes to, you know, social media.
I think the really smart part of that strategy was also thinking about the flighting and the relevance and what would be topical specifically in that season.
Yep.
And tying it to baseball. That's a great kind of approach as well, and kind of when we're planning campaigns, like, we absolutely have to know what our target's going to be talking about online. If I have to reach, you know, millennials 18 to 34 during the mid-April, I mean, I really got to think about how I can tie this back to Coachella so it's not a huge, you know, sore thumb sticking out in the feed that's just feeling off topic. So that's a smart approach.
Exactly. And, you know, it's digging into more, like you said, not just the category of the person, but the person themselves and their audience, having that audience-first approach.
If you heard nothing from this today, all you can take away is that pets are pretty universal. They work for just about anything.
If you have one thing to take away, that's it. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and so, you know, that being said, at the end of the day, it's really just about that right narrative. It's being able to tell the right story and finding the right people who can help you with that story. It may not always seem like a straightforward shot. It may not always be like the diapers and the moms. But, you know, a lot of times it's about working with the creative teams, coming up with unique ideas that helps us to find those audiences. It's using the data to find people people who have the relevant audiences and who have the relevant engagement. You know, at Open Influence, we use our image recognition technology to find the people who have the right engagement on the right topics. So if we're looking for somebody if we're working with a glasses brand like Warby Parker, and we're looking for people who are wearing glasses, no one's writing hashtag glasses on their content, right? So, but we're looking for people who have higher engagement when they wear their glasses, right? So it's being able to find use the data and use more than just the categories to find those people.
It's funny, absolutely. I think OI has been one of our favorite partners to work with because they make that part of the process of finding influencers so much easier, and that is by far the most difficult part of an influencer campaign, and I think the part that also separates good campaigns from great campaigns. It's finding those contextual relevant fits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's what really allows us to tell the right stories and have that right narrative, is not just having those influencers, but being able to really showcase what the product is or what the service is in the most authentic way for their audience. So,
how many times do you think everyone's going to hear the word authentic today?
We should make it a drinking game.
Yeah. Drinking game.
for happy hour, a new drinking game every time you hear the word authentic. Okay, and now as we're making our jokes, we're being told to stop. So thank you very much. I think we could probably talk about this on, and if later today during the happy hour you want to dig a little more into this topic, please find Say. I'm sure she'll be happy to chat with you. Thank you, guys.